Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is Gratitude Shift Wednesday. Gratitude Shift Wednesday, you guys. And we're talking about the law of polarity this morning, right? Um, I'm excited about this conversation. This week, we're talking about how to design your roadmap, right? Vision and goals, our visions and goals. And the goal was to really use these universal laws to help, right? To help us to build a vision, to create the goals. So here's the thing: what failure have you been letting shape your future? What failure have you been allowing to shape your future, right? What did that failure teach you, right? And what are you finally ready to release? That's what I want you to think about as we go through this conversation, because this isn't about pretending that it didn't hurt, right? This is about really realizing that it didn't destroy your purpose. It didn't destroy your purpose, you guys. Right. Why? Because I've seen too many brilliant people disqualify themselves from purpose because of a past they never healed from. Because of a past that they never healed from. We've been taught to treat failure as a finish line when it's really a mirror, a map, or just a moment. Okay. So this session is really about shifting the way we see setbacks, because failure isn't who you are, it's what you went through. All right. Failure isn't who you are, it's what you went through. And it gives you something sacred, right? It gives you something to work with. All right. If we take the right perspective. All right. So the disclaimer this morning is that this session is really here to help you become aware of how past failures have shaped your present goals. All right. But we know that true transformation begins when you choose to start building from fear, when you choose to stop building from fear and start building from clarity, you guys. All right. Gratitude doesn't mean you're not happy about the pain. Gratitude doesn't mean you're happy about the pain. It means you've made peace. You made peace with the purpose that it brought you. So I want to say good morning. Good morning, you guys. I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons, right? With me, Dr. Sheila Little. If you're new here, I thank you. I thank you. Good morning, Mariah. I thank you for your presence here on this day. Um, I'm excited about this morning's conversation because I like the law of polarity. I really love this law of polarity because I think it gives us permission to live in the end, A and D, right? And so many of us have been given stories that we're going to discuss through this session. So if you're busy or something like that, just make sure you come back and tune in, because this law really helps us to set an understanding for why life is happening the way it's happening, why things are going the way that they are going. And if we can really just accept this universal law as a part of the process, I think that we will find more grace and compassion for ourselves. Okay. Good morning, Lakrita. And good morning, Lewis. Good morning. Good morning. All right. So I want to welcome you back. It's Gratitude Shift Wednesday, and we're unpacking the emotional weight of failure. We're going to unpack that this morning, not to dwell in it, but to finally shift our relationship with failure. All right. Because here's the thing: failure is not your identity. It is your feedback. And you get to decide, right, what it means now. All right, you get to decide what that means now. Now, for a long time, you may have interpreted as something different, but I want this life lesson to give you an opportunity to go back in, right, and say, okay, what did that failure mean, right? And you get to change that definition, okay? So here's what I want you to do: drop a word in the comment and let me know how you feeling this morning. All right. This morning I'm feeling a little slow motion. Okay, I'm feeling a little slow motion this morning. I got up and I said, I'm just gonna take my time this morning. Many of you know I came back from LA, and it's like getting back into the gist of things, like allowing my body to like rest, from those long flights and all of that. So I'm slow motion, but I'm all right. I'm slow motion, but I'm all right. Okay. How are you feeling this morning? How are you feeling this morning? Let me know in the comments. Listen, who this session is for? It's for you if you stop setting big goals because the last ones didn't work out, right? This session is for you if you really stop planning for your life, stop caring about what the future holds, because every time you planned, right, it didn't go how you wanted it to go. All right. This is for you if you feel safer planning for what's realistic than really dreaming big, right? So a lot of us are realists. The reality of it is this is how life is, right? We have a very foundational, this is for a person that has a very foundational approach that safe is better, right? And that's okay if that's aligned with who you were created to be. But if you have a big dream, Lucretia says she's pushing. Okay. If you have a big dream and you're settling for something that's safer, then that's very different because that is misalignment. And that misalignment is creating a dis-ease in your life. And you may not own that dis-ease as this settling, but it's happening and you see it maybe in your relationship, maybe in your job, right? There's this grief of that you're experiencing that you may be living in that from the life I felt like I wanted in the life that I have. All right. So if you feel safer planning for what's realistic than dreaming big, and you have big dreams that you're not accomplishing, guess what? This session is for you. And if you're still carrying shame or regret from the time you feel you messed up, all right. If you're still carrying shame and regret from the time you messed up, then this session is for you. Listen, this is for you if you've been really making your past the architect of your future. If you've been making the past the architect of your future, what does that mean? That every every future opportunity you are using your emotional wound to be the blueprint of how you move forward in relationships and how you move forward in your life, right? With your job and your careers, right? Because there's an emotional wound that becomes the blueprint. So you're going in more protective, you're going in more realistic, you're going in, looking for looking for the resistance, right? To justify you know, why you're not showing up in your life. Okay. All right. So today's quote is failure is not a life lesson. Okay. It's a teacher. I'm sorry. Failure is not a life sentence. It's a teacher and you don't have to keep retaking the same class. All right. Failure is not a life sentence. It is a teacher and you don't have to keep retaking this class. All right. You really don't. And a lot of us were frustrated. I'm just going to move my camera. We're frustrated and we're annoyed because we feel like we're taking the same class over and over again, right? We're taking the same class. We're not really advancing, and that is causing problems in our life, in our relationships. Okay, and so this powerful quote this morning is that failure is not a life sentence, you guys. It's a teacher, right? And you don't have to keep retaking the same class. You really don't. We really don't. I really want to emphasize that. Um, I do see school. I do see life as school, right? It's a place where we learn, right? And we grow and we can advance through life, like from a grade school type of thinking to, more complex thinking of like what junior high would do, and then more applicable thinking like in high school, and then the graduation thinking where we're really putting it in practice, like the college type of thing, to the point that we become masters and doctors of our life. You know what? When we take the lessons, when we learn, when we pass, right? And we can do that in the same space, in the same relationships, or we can use different relationships to do that, you guys, different relationships in our personal life, different relationships in our business, right? They can be data to really get us to advance through life, right? And really become masters and doctors in how we really are responding to life because we have taken that as data, we have taken that as feedback, and we have applied what we know, right? And so our habits start to change, our beliefs start to change, right? Because we are shifting who we are as we go and accepting these lessons. All right. So here's the thing. There was a woman that I worked with who had finally worked up the courage to start dating again. All right. From a very painful breakup, right? This breakup happened years ago, right? She had done therapy, she had done some inner work, she had started to journal. But when someone genuinely kind, right, and interested came along, she would freeze up. She would freeze up, right? So instead of excitement about these new opportunities of these individuals that was coming into her life, right? She felt dread, right? Every time he showed her attention, every time he stayed on the phone and talked to her, every time he would compliment her, her mind got scared. And it would say, it won't last, right? He's going to leave me like the last one did. He's going to cheat on me like the last one did, right? She wasn't reacting to him, though. She wasn't really reacting to him, right? She was still reacting from what? From the heartbreak that she never fully released, that she had never fully released. So that breakup had become her emotional blueprint, right? Defining what she allowed herself to expect from who? From love, right? She had become so hurt that that hurt had imprinted her emotional person, that it started to really define what she expected from love. You guys, good morning, brother, right? So as she revisited the moments, right, using the universal laws, because I use them in my personal practice, right? As she started to use the universal laws, you know what? She started to realize it wasn't that she wasn't ready, you guys. It was that she was still carrying failure like it was a warning label, like it was the red flag, right? Like it was the thing that, when I feel this feeling, it must be true. So something must be wrong. And it was determining how she moved, right? So back to Monday, we talked about the law of belief, right? So her belief was, when I let someone in, I'll get hurt, right? That was her belief. And so that was what was replicated, and that was what she was looking for. And guess what? In this case, she was really hurting herself because this guy wanted to pay her attention, right? Wanted to court her, but she didn't want that. And silently, she was hurting, right? So this law of belief was taking effect, not from somebody else, but because of what she was doing for herself by being so restrictive, right? And then yesterday, we talked about the law of polarity. No, we're talking about the law of polarity. Yesterday we talked about a law, and that law that we talked about was, her story under that was, being seen feels dangerous, right? We talked about triggers, okay, in the law of expansion. And as she expanded, right, as she started to introduce herself to new people, right, it felt dangerous to her. So every time this new person would come in and provide her with a new experience, it felt dangerous, right? So the law of expansion really wasn't working for her because she didn't really understand. Well, listen, it may feel uncomfortable, but you're labeling it as danger, right? And it's just really a universal law that this person is expanding your experience, right, with love. Okay. And that triggered her. All right. And then the law today, the law of polarity, she realized, right, that failed relationships didn't define her worth. It defined her discernment. It defined her discernment. And from that shift, she stopped planning her love life from fear. She began opening herself up to connecting in, right, with clarity and calm, right? Because this law of polarity is really here to help to stretch us, right, and prepare us. And I talked about this yesterday when I talked about expansion, and how we have to dilate to like a 10, right, to birth a baby. Well, when we expand, there's also a polarity that's happening in that expansion, right? You have the negative and the positive, you have an up and down, right? You have what's in and out. right? So there's this construct that is a universal law that we cannot escape, that we cannot escape. That's truly creating our experience. And when we become aware of that, I think that we can start really defining, like, and really changing our narrative around how we experience conflict in our life, you guys. All right. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause and I want you to think about what past failures are you still carrying in your goal setting process, in your vision making process, right? What past failures are you still carrying about that, right? And I want you to ask yourself, what did it teach you? And what are you ready to release? All right. Because here's the thing, here's what the law of polarity truly is, right? The law of polarity says that everything in the universe has an equal and opposite counterparts, right? So you can't know light, you guys, without knowing dark. You can't know success though without knowing struggle, right? And you can't evolve in life without friction. This is a law, and somewhere in our minds, and I think it's like when you're younger, and let me know if I'm wrong. Put a thumbs up if this is a good hypothesis or a good assumption. I think when we're younger and we go through conflict, that's not our conflict. It's a consequence of the environment that we live in. I think we create a story, and the story is that I'm gonna be happy and nothing's gonna happen to me. Like when I become an adult, like life is going to be beautiful and amazing, right? People are gonna treat me good. I'm gonna fall in love, right? We have a very polarized idea of what we are going to experience once we come from under the tutelage of the environment that we grew up in. If it was with our grandmothers, our parents, in school or whatever, we made ourselves a promise that, when we become adults, that life is going to be amazing. And what we didn't know at that time was this universal law of polarity, that life can be amazing, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to feel resistance. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to fail. And when those things happen, it does not define who you are. It is a part of the process, right? So here's a little deeper truth about the law of polarity. Polarity doesn't punish you, it prepares you, right? Polarity doesn't punish you, it prepares you. It really brings contrast so that you can make conscious choices, right? And not reactive ones. When I said that, I what came up in my spirit was like digging down in the ground. So if you're planting a seed, right, you dig down, right? You dig down because you understand that the seed has to go deep down enough, right, to be cultivated or to be supported or to be covered by what, the soil, right? So before it can even grow up, before we're even growing, you know, upward, right? We dig down. We dig down into the ground. Okay. All right. So that's a great analogy for your vision and your goals. When you have the seed, there's the contrast feeling that you're going to have to experience first. That's the digging, right? Digging down to create the contrast of what? How big your tree is going to grow. And we know that when roots run deep, when roots run deep down in the ground, right, the trees tends to grow stronger, become more sturdy, right? There are some trees that don't need that, like the redwood tree, right? But the redwood tree doesn't need depth because it's supported by other redwood trees, meaning that there's a system of the roots that tie together. So it doesn't need the depthness because it's supported by other things. But in our contrast in life, we have to dig down before we dig up. All right. So here's what you need to understand, that you can't expand without experiencing contrast, right? You cannot expand in life without experiencing contrast. So every time you move towards clarity, guess what? Confusion will show up. Confusion will show up. It's a universal law. Every time you set goals, guess what? Resistance will rise. Resistance will rise. Good morning, Miss Jackie. Good morning, Miss Jackie. She said I'm moving and shaking with my morning routine, but I'm listening. Thank you, Miss Jackie. All right. So every time you set a goal, guess what? Resistance will rise. And every time you elevate in your life, guess what? something will try to anchor you back to who you were. Something will try to anchor you back to who you were, right? That can be a person, that could be a circumstance, that could be an ailment, right? It will show up, right? Because it's the polarity. It's the polarity of what you want, right? So this polarity this is not sabotage. It's a sacred stretching, right? It's like the polarity. It's truly a beautiful thing, uh, so let me read this. The obstacle isn't the detour, right? It is an activation, right? It helps you to define what actually is aligned. I like talking about the law of polarity, and I always think about the Garden of Eden. If you believe in the Bible, and we know that there was what, two trees in the garden. There was the tree of knowledge and good and bad, right? And then there was the tree of life, right? And from all of the other trees, right, the story says that what? You can eat from all the other trees, but from the tree of knowledge and good and bad, do not eat, right? And I remember a person breaking down, well, why would the tree of knowledge and good and bad even be in the garden? Why would it be there? What was its purpose, right? This one tree that had the potential to destroy, right, in this story, mankind, because it's the universal law. It needed its opposite for it to even exist, right? For the Garden of Eden to even exist, God had to create the polarity of life. He had to, because it's a universal law. Everything has an up and a down, a left and a right. And in this garden, he couldn't just have good. Couldn't just have good, right? Without the perception of bad being present, right? The temptation of bad being present. If that makes sense, put a one in the chat. So if this is a universal law, then we have to know that this is a part of life, right? This conflict, this resistance, right? This confusion, right? It's a part of life, but it's not a part of our identity. And I think that is where we get it wrong. It's not a part of our identity, you guys, and that's where we get it wrong, right? Listen, a real life example of this is a business person who may launch like a new offer, right? And they're so excited about that. I've experienced this, so this is actually a true story, right? Then somebody, this is my story, somebody, um, nobody signed up, right? So I launched this program back in 2022, right? And nobody signed up for the program. I felt like it was the best program in the world, and nobody signed up for it, right? My whole story crept in, right? I failed. Like, what did I do wrong, right? I should have probably did this. This is like off timing. Good morning, Pep. Right, this is off timing and all of that, right? But the law of polarity kicked in for me. This contrast was really showing me where I could refine my message, where I could elevate my belief, and where I could deepen my strategy, right? And that wasn't failure, that was feedback. And I learned that because I went and got a coach, right? I went and got a coach to really streamline that program. And I launched it again 2 times in 2022. And I ended up enrolling like 20 people into that program, and it ended up being very successful. All right. But that first launch, I didn't get anybody. And guess what? I started to identify with that, not because the program was a failure, but because I personalized nobody signed up for this as my failure. All right. All right. Listen, every problem is partnered with the possibility, you guys. Every problem is partnered with what, a solution, a possibility. All right. So polarity really teaches us the answer is always located in the presence of the problem. All right. So if you feel stuck, it means momentum is possible. If you feel disappointed, guess what? This means that the desire to live still exists in you. All right. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, this means that you're growing past your old capacity. How do we see this in real? How do we also see this? In relationships, you often hear people say, if she's still arguing with you, she loves you, right? If there's still some care there or some effort there, right, then the opposite is there, right? But when they stop talking to you, that's when a problem occurs, right? Because the law of polarity is still there. If I'm willing to talk to you, if I'm willing to sit down and argue with you, if I'm trying to do something, guess what? There's still the polarity of my dis-ease that has to be there. That's why I'm pushing, right? But when I stop talking, there's no polarity. I've totally disconnected, right? So there is no block that doesn't contain a breakthrough. All right. There is no block that does not contain a breakthrough. If you learn to feel your way through it, right, instead of fleeing from it, you will experience the wholeness of the situation. And a lot of times when we're on the polar, what we perceive as a negative end, right, we will flee from it. We don't see it as, oh, there's the opposite here, right? If there's pain, then there's pleasure, right? If there's stuckness, then there's momentum, right? If there's disappointment, then there's desire. Okay. And when we can see life from those, from the whole from the polarity, then I think we can get back hopeful again. All right. Okay. The other thing is that polarity makes peace with your past, you guys. So many of you may feel ashamed of how long it's taking you to heal, grow, or even break up after a disappointment, right? Or get back up after a disappointment. So many of you may feel some shame around how long it's taking you to heal, how long it's taking you to grow, or maybe even get back up after a disappointment. But here's what the law says. Here's what this law of polarity says. If you know deep grief, if you know deep grief, you're equally wired for deep joy. So if you're one of those people who have deep, deep grief and deep, deep pain, guess what? That means that you have deep, deep love and deep, deep passion. Okay. If you experience rejection, right, you're already qualified for divine acceptance. All right. So if you've experienced rejection, guess what? That's the polarity of what? Acceptance. And so many of us are, good morning, Dale. Good morning, Dale. So many of us, we're stuck on rejection and we are allow rejection to make us feel unworthy, not enough, and all of that. But the experience of the rejection, there's a polarity there. So that means that there's what? Somebody who will accept me. It has to be someone who would accept me because it's a universal law, right? So this one person rejecting me doesn't define my identity. What it shows me is that there is one person who will accept me, right? Right. So this is the power of understanding what the law of polarity, right? Another thing is if you sit in confusion, right? If you sitting in confusion, it means clarity is trying to rise, right? Why do I know that? Because it's a law. This law really teaches us that nothing has been wasted, right? The lowest points of our life are not there to disqualify us. They are there for the refining process. All right. An important thing that we need to know though that polarity, it does require emotional intelligence. It does. It requires emotional intelligence, but it doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require perfection. This law isn't about being positive all the time. It's not about that. It's about recognizing the contrast without making it your truth. It's about recognizing the contrast without over identifying with that, either side of it. It's an experience. All right. It's about holding space for the duality of life, right? You can have grief and still grow, right? You can have rejection and still be accepted, right? You can have loss and still gain. All right. We don't have to live on one side of the polarity. All right. Moving with and another thing is moving with the wisdom that both pain and possibilities are our teachers, right? Both pain and possibilities are a teacher. Listen, if we stop gaslighting ourselves, if we stop gaslighting ourselves, right, when life gets hard, if we can stop gaslighting ourselves when life gets hard and start to say that this is a part of the process, and I know how to hold both truths, right? We have to stop gaslighting ourselves and really start telling ourselves and accepting that this is a part of the process, and I know that both sides are true. If I've experienced failure, guess what? Hope is there. If I experience pain, then love is for me, right? I mean, pleasure is for me. If I experience heartache, right, then love is definitely a possibility. Why? Because of the polarity. It's a universal law. And this is when we start talking about living for something that is higher than us, right? Really tucking under these universal laws. It's so important. It's so important. But sometimes we'll take ourselves out of the equation because of our experience, you guys. So here's some more hidden truths about the law of polarity. Polarity, again, is not a punishment, it's preparation, right? This law isn't about keeping you stuck in cycles. It's really about helping you build emotional capacity for the things that you say you're ready for, right? For the things that you say you're ready for. Polarity really helps your nervous system stretch. It helps your nervous system stretch before the breakthrough arrives. Okay. So if you feel like you're constantly on this roller coaster of highs and lows, what you need to know is that the contrast isn't trying to break you. The contrast of the high and lows is not trying to break you. It's trying to build a stamina to sustain what you prayed for, what you've desired, right? Right? Your bounce back game is very spiritual, right? And polarity is the workout because it's stretching you. It's like moving you up and down to what? To work with that law of expansion, right? As I experience these negative things, right? And then I experience good things, and I experience negative things, and I experience good things, right? A lot of us don't even have the actual experience of the highs and lows in our external life, right? Because we experience the low, right? And then we get hopeful of a high, but because our focus and our belief is stuck on the low, we start to experience the low, and so we will stay low, right? Which doesn't even work with the law of expansion. So we have to know that the law of polarity is there. All of these laws work together. And this law of polarity is there to say, like, hey, if you've experienced a bad thing, know that a good thing is waiting to be experienced too. Who is responsible? Who is responsible for you experiencing that good thing though? You. You are responsible for that, right? And I know we pray for it. I know that we talk about it, but this requires the activity. It actually requires the action. All right. Right. Listen, delay is a form of priority polarity. Another thing I want you to know is that delay is a form of polarity, right? Many people think that if it's delayed, maybe I missed it. Maybe it's not meant to be. But under this law, right, delay is a part of the development, right? So polarity, right, uses time to show you, right, where you're still emotionally attached, right? So basically, what you're still emotionally attached to, right? What you're trying to control, right? And what you still need to release. What you still need to release. Okay. Why is that important? Because in life, right, we have to detach ourselves. There's this clip going around of Will Smith, and he's talking about this top cliff theory, right? So he talked about people who live in rock bottom, they end up changing their life or whatever. But he talked about this cliff place, right? This kind of place where you bust out the top and when you burst out the top, like it's only you and God, you know. But what he's really saying is that in both of these places we detach, right? So it becomes a point in life. What his theory is that it becomes a time in life where we're no longer attached to the things. We realize that the money is not going to make me happy. that the no matter how big the house is not going to make me happy. No matter, who I get in relationships, or how I date, or how great my sex life is, or, how beautiful my woman is, or how handsome my mate is. And, all of these tangible things that we are trying to use to define who we are, they will never define who you are, right? And you can have so much money that you go out and you do all of these things, and you realize that those things don't make you happy, and you have to turn inward. All right. So the law of polarity does this, because when time is there, sometimes the delay is there to really get you to see that maybe you can do the thing that you want to do without the thing that you say you need. What does that look like? So you may, I don't know, ask a person. Let's just say you may ask a person um, to help you move, to help you move, and you really need this a friend, and you really need this friend to come help you move your stuff, right? And the friend is delayed. The friend's help is delayed, right? The friend is not showing up the way you want to. The day comes for you to move, and guess what? People show up in your life to help you move anyway, right? So you get to move the stuff, right? Now, the friend's help was delayed, but what you had attached to that, the meaning of that friend helping you, was really your own narrative, because you felt like you probably couldn't move without this friend's help. But what the delay of his help was showing you is that you didn't really need his help, right? You got the job done anyway. Does that make sense? So sometimes our delay is there because we have identified with whatever the thing we're praying with, and we're saying that that's going to be the solution for the problem that I'm facing. And it's just not true, right? The problem you're facing will get resolved. People will come. Why? Because God worked through people. And if it's an honest prayer, if we're attaching love to people, if we're attaching safety to people, if we're attaching, anything, right? This law of polarity will delay where you want it to come from, right? And it will still happen in your life, and the person or the place or how you thought it would happen wouldn't happen. That part gets delayed. And guess what? You know what the typical person would do in this situation? They get the help anyway. The people come help them move. Maybe it's the neighbors, maybe it's some strangers that see you carrying, the couch out, trying to carry the couch out by yourself, and strangers stop and help you, right? Guess what you didn't recognize in this? And this is why this is Gratitude Shift Wednesday. You didn't realize that the help showed up. When you get on the phone that night, guess what you talk about? The friend that didn't show up. Yeah, man, I went to move the furniture, and Joe was supposed to come help me. That N-word didn't even come. That's what I'm saying. That's why I don't even have friends. Guess what? That's your story. Because the thing that you asked for actually showed up, but the delay of what you wanted wasn't there. That's the polarity. You got what you wanted, and then you got the pain, and you get to choose what story you get to honor. You get to choose where you place your gratitude. And a lot of us have lost friends, right? Have validated our limitations and supported our wounds because it didn't happen how we wanted to. All right. So this law of a polarity will form delays, right? To really get you to see what you're emotionally attached to, what you're trying to control, and listen, what you still need to release. All right. If that makes sense, put a one in the chat, right? So instead of saying to yourself, why isn't it here yet, or why didn't they do this, right? Maybe you can start asking yourself, what is God trying to teach me, right? What is this space trying to prepare me for? Like, get curious and stay grateful. All right. Another thing is that the law of polarity reveals the patterns, right? Patterns with pain, right? So the law of polarity reveals your pattern with pain, right? So this is where it kind of gets personal, right? What do you typically do? What do you typically do when something doesn't go your way? What do you typically do when something doesn't go your way? Do you freeze? Do you flee? Do you perform harder? Right? Do you try to prove something? Do you numb out, right? Listen, this reaction is your emotional default, right? Going back to that, my friend didn't help me, right? That is the pattern. That is the pattern that the delay, right, is showing up, right? Listen, this reaction is your emotional default and it holds the key to where you need to heal, right? Right? Where you need to heal and not hustle and not create a story and not bring that emotional blueprint into this present situation. All right. Because how you handle contrast really determines whether it becomes the catalyst for growth or the cycle that you have continued to live in, right? The cycle of pain, the cycle of doubt, the cycle of no new friends, the cycle of limited capacity, right? So how you handle conflict will determine if this going to be the catalyst to my growth or is this going to be a repeated cycle for me. Okay, polarity isn't just about what happens around you, right? It's about how you respond on the inside. All right, gratitude is the gateway, though. The gratitude is the gateway through polarity, right? You can't skip the hard parts, you guys. You cannot skip the hard parts, but you can learn to bless them. You can learn to bless them. Gratitude doesn't mean, and I want to say this, gratitude shift Wednesday and gratitude in itself, it doesn't mean I'm glad that this happened, right? It means I trust. I trust that what it's that I trust that this has meaning, even if I can't see it yet, right? I trust that this thing that's happening is working for me. It's revealing myself to me. That is what the gratitude is. It's trusting that this experience has meaning that's going to help um, to help edify or empower me. All right. So on this gratitude shift Wednesday, I want to invite you to stop resenting resistance, right? And start reclaiming it. Start seeing it as a part of the process because gratitude rewrites how your nervous system stores stories, right? If you start to teach yourself that this thing has meaning, so it's safe for me to go through it, you start to use that neuroplasticity that starts to really shift how your nervous system responds to what resistance, right? How it responds to resistance. Listen, polarity really teaches you that the presence of pain doesn't mean the absence of purpose, right? The setback doesn't cancel your vision, you guys, and the obstacle isn't opposite of alignment, right? It's evidence of alignment, right? Um, you know, so many biblical stories, show us this polarity. Joseph, I think his brothers, right, threw him in a pit for him to get killed. He ended up being like the king's right hand man, right? That's the polarity, right? You know, it's so many times we see this, right? The Yahshua the Messiah, right? He died on the throne. Why? To give us, died on the cross, the perceived cross, right? He died on this cross. Why? To give us life, right? He went through all of this pain. Why? To allow us um to be redeemed of our sins, right? This is the polarity of life. So this law of polarity really reminds us that you're not behind, you're being balanced. And that's what life is about. So the tension that you feel isn't the tension you feel, it's evidence of your growth, you guys. The obstacles that you face, they're there to show you that they're there to show you what you're ready to outgrow, you guys. In the past you're still carrying is not the end of the story. It's the setup for the alignment. So if your story is your past story, that's not your identity, right? There's a polarity to that. There is a polarity to that. Okay, because the law of polarity says that every obstacle contains a seed. Every obstacle contains a seed of its opposite, right? So your pain gives you wisdom, your disappointment gives you clarity, and your setback really was a setup for discernment, all right? Your setback was a setup for discernment. If you don't shift how you relate to failure, you'll keep shrinking your vision to protect yourself from pain. All right. If you don't start shifting how you relate to failure, you guys, you will keep shrinking your vision to protect yourself from pain. But when you learn to thank your failure, not worship it, but thank it, right? You gain power over it. You gain power over it, you guys. Listen, gratitude really helps you separate who you are from what happened to you. Who you are from what happened to you. And this is emotional liberation. All right. A former client of mine said, I stopped launching anything for years after it flopped. Right. This is a business entrepreneur that I work with. She said, I stopped launching anything for years after the flop. But this program is really helping me to see that my failures wasn't personal. They were preparation, right? So now I can create from peace, not performance. I want you to know that studies of post failure resilience show that self compassion, not perfection, that self compassion leads to higher future success. Gratitude helps to rewire the brain helps to rewire the brain to really process failure as insight and not injury. All right. So self compassion is so important as an adult. Okay. Right. What happened to you guys is real. Right. What happened is real, but it's not your identity. Right. It's not your identity. All right. Let's move to the obstacles. That was just the introduction. Okay, listen. We know that the O stands for obstacles, right? Not the kind that we run from, though, but the kind that helps us to really meet our truth. All right. So here's the thing: you're not stuck. You're not still stuck, right? You're still defining what the moment meant. Okay. I want you to hear this. You are not still stuck. You are still defining what that moment meant, right? So you have permission to shift that meaning, right? And take your power back. All right. Because here's the thing, most people aren't afraid of failing, right? They're afraid of what they'll say to themselves if they fail. Most of you guys are not scared of failing. You're afraid of what the internal dialogue is going to be and what the external dialogue is going to be. Okay. So, and what we will say to ourselves is things like, I can't handle another disappointment, right? I'm beating up on myself again, right? If I mess this up, it'll just prove what I thought all along, right? Here's the truth. There, that you're not afraid of the outcome. You're not afraid of the outcome, you guys. You're afraid of the internal dialogue that gets triggered by the outcome. A lot of us are definitely fearful of the conversations that happen in our head. Like I say, I have an annihilator, and sometimes that failure will trigger that annihilator. And so it's not that I'm avoiding the situation. If I have a fear of failing, sometimes I don't want to deal with this thought in my head that's keeping me up all night, that I'm going to have to think about how did I do that and all of that. And that is the thing that's stopping you. All right. So this is why I really reworking that inner critic and showing up for those Friday sessions, those Friday life lessons, and showing up for the coaching labs is important, because that's where we recreate this inner narrative, right? Right, because we learned that it's not about the event. It's not just about the event. It's about the identity that you attach to the event, right? And if we can have enough courage to really separate our identity from the event and be willing to change the narrative, right? And give ourselves permission to make a different relationship with this inner critic, then guess what? We can allow the life to do what life do, this contrast of polarity. All right. Listen, your nervous system remembers the emotional cost of failure. I want you to know that these obstacles are showing up because your nervous system remembers that. Your nervous system remembers that. It's so funny because when I think about the nervous system, I think about how we used to get whooped when we were younger, you know, and that tensing, and like if you've ever got that, think about it when you were younger. When you got your first whooping, if you ever got a whooping, because I'm not assuming that everybody got a whooping, but it's like, were you the kid that even before the belt swung, you was tension, cringing and cringing because you knew what the pain was going to feel like? Or were you the kid that hollered before the belt even got to you, and your mom was like, or your dad was like, you hollering, I ain't even touch you yet, right? Why did you holler? Because the nervous system remembered the pain. So it was preparing for what? For the lick. It was preparing you for the lick. So you started to scream before the belt even got to you because you remember what the belt felt like before. The nervous system did that, right? And so, your mom would go back again to hit you, and then you would just act like you already are in the motion of getting the whooping. And you ain't even got the whooping yet. If that makes sense, put it 2 in the chat. I have brothers, and they were hilarious. Like this was hilarious in our life. And after the whooping, after we counted our whips on our legs and how many extension cords wrapped around our legs, we would laugh about this because it was as if the nervous system was preparing, right? So I want you to know that that same thing happens in our life as adults. My brother put a 2 in the chat, right? Because he was funny. He was the funny one, right? Listen, the nerve, that same analogy is what happens to our nervous system, right? It is the same exact thing. It remembers the pain. It remembers the pain. So it will start to react before the lick even happens. That is what I'm saying. So your nervous system will start to prepare you, and you will start to shift emotionally, and you will start to do things before the lick even happened, or you just assuming that the lick gonna come, right. So here's what I need you to know, that what that does is it trains you to stay small and stay safe, right? It that trains you to dream soft and avoid disappointment, and it trains you to set reasonable goals to really reasonable goals to preserve emotional stability. Okay, because the nervous system remembered the pain, and so it's like we don't want to feel that. So stay small, dream soft, right? So we don't get disappointed, and set reasonable goals, right? We don't want to step into this expansive place, because that's going to what? Hurt. Okay, so when you start to expand, the nervous system really flares up, not because you're not capable, but because it remembers what it felt like the last time you stretched and you failed. Okay, listen, this is what I want you to know. Your body is still trying to protect the version of you that was devastated the last time you got hurt. Your body and your nervous system is trying to protect you. Okay, but this time you're different. This time, you're not the same, right? This time, you have the tools. So when the nervous system does that, because you've been equipped with the life lessons, because you've invested in the coaching labs, because you're talking about it, right? Because you understand the universal laws, because you shape your life, because you understand the limits, right? Now you can pause and you can get into manual gear, all right, because you have the tools to override that nervous system, all right, and to let yourself know that you're safe. All right, listen, failure reveals. Another thing I want you to know is that failure reveals your self trust threshold. All right, so failure truly reveals your self trust threshold. This is big. This is truly big, because if I trust myself to recover, guess what? Failure doesn't scare me. If I trust myself to learn, mistakes, they become my fuel, right? And if I trust myself to pivot, right? To pivot, the plan can change, you guys, but the vision will stay intact. Do you get that? So failure reveals my self trust threshold, right? If I'm not trusting myself, right, that's why I'm seeing this failure as what? As truth. That's why I'm not applying the law of polarity, because I'm not trusting me, right? So this. So the real relationship that needs healing, you guys, to be able to embrace this law of polarity is self trust, right? That is the link between your past and your future. That is the emotional glue that's really holding your belief and your actions together. All right. That is the glue. All right. Because failure is revealing your threshold. And I'm telling you, if you trust that you will recover from anything, right? Failure don't scare you. If you trust that you are a quick learner, that you can learn, right? Right? Mistakes become fuel. Like you get more curious. Like, what did I do? Like, let me go back to the drawing board, right? And if you can trust yourself to pivot, right, when things come in and plans change and things don't go the way you thought they should go, you're not all frantic, right? You're like, okay, all right, because the vision is still intact, right? We still gonna get there. We just got a detour. All right. All right, that makes sense. Put a three in the chat for me. All right, listen, your response to failure is what defines you, right? Not your response to failure is what defines you, not the failure itself. Okay. So this is especially true for, I would say, high functioning people, visionary people, emotionally intelligent people, right? Who often judge themselves harder after setbacks. You know, what my research showed me, if most of you if you don't know, I did a research on the relationship between emotional intelligence and procrastination, right? And what it said was that people who have high emotional intelligence, guess what? They tend to procrastinate more, especially in this one construct of self management, right? So, again, emotional intelligence is a house and it's self awareness, social skills, and things like that. So, in this construct of self management, guess what? People tended to procrastinate more. Why? Because of perfectionism, right? Because of overanalyzing, right? They were so aware of overconfident. So we need to know that it from a fear of failing. So they just manage themselves and want everything to be right, right. So they have high emotional intelligence. They're very aware of the circumstances, the outcomes, how they're feeling, and things like that. And that led them to procrastinate more because what were they doing? They were either overconfident, they were trying to perfect this thing, right? They knew how they felt, they knew how they wanted it to be, and they were trying to control it more, which is why emotional intelligence is a house, and we need these other constructs to balance this out. All right. So what you need to know is that you can't punish yourself into progress, right? You can't shame yourself into alignment, and you can't build a life of expansion with a voice inside that only speaks to you when you win. Okay. Listen, you cannot punish yourself into progress. No matter how much you try to, you can't punish you can't, Again, we talked about the inner critic on Friday. Like some of us is like, yeah, but I gotta talk to myself hard. And I see this in I'm using this word softly, toxic masculinity, where it's like, well, I gotta be hard to my sons and I gotta push them and push them. Like, listen, that's you can't punish a person into progress. Okay. You can't shame yourself into alignment. It's not going to happen. And you definitely can't build a life of expansion if you only want to win, right? If you only willing to speak to yourself when you're winning. All right. All right. Um, so this, so the way you respond to failures really determine how boldly you set your next goals, how much you trust, how much you trust yourself, how much trust you build with yourself, and whether you keep choosing yourself even when it's messy, right? Are you going to keep choosing yourself even when it's messy? All right. Here's the thing. You've been defining your future through a lens of your most fragile season. You have been defining who you are from a lens of your most fragile season, right? To me, that's like the shattered glass. Like you're looking at yourself through broken glasses. All right. Listen, you're not built. You have you're not building this dream with the same version of you that failed before. All right, you're not building this life with the same version of you that failed before. That version didn't have the tools. it didn't even have that experience of failure. Okay. It didn't even have that experience of failure, right? It didn't have the clarity or the self-awareness, right? So you didn't have the tools, you didn't have that experience, you didn't have the clarity, and you didn't have the self-awareness that you have now. That you have now. So I want to invite you, I want to invite you to stop treating failure like it's your fate, right? And start treating it like it's your teacher, okay? Not not a mirror. Failure is not a mirror of who you are, but it's a map of what you need to know. It's a map of what you need to know. All right. So your relationship with failure is directly tied to your relationship with your own resilience. All right. And this session isn't just about goals, you guys, or visions. It's really about emotional recovery. All right. It's about breaking the link between your failure and your identity. All right. And replacing it with compassion, with clarity, with commitment. All right. And we do that by knowing this universal law and understanding that if I fail, guess what? Then success is in my future, right? If I hurt, then that means that pleasure is in my future. Okay. All right. And we have to stop identifying who we are from the lowest point in our life, because if there was a low point in your life, guess what? There's a high part too that you can experience, that you will experience when you activate your life. All right. All right. Okay, so we're at an hour. We're at an hour, but I do want to get through this biblical wisdom. If you have to log off, you can. If you but come back for the biblical wisdom, because I do think that it'll be practical to what this whole conversation was about. All right, so listen. Our promise verse is, and God, we know that all things God works good for those who love Him. Right. This is Romans 8:21. Right. This doesn't mean that everything feels good, you guys. It doesn't mean that everything feels good, but that everything can be used for good. Right. Including your failure. Right. What this means practically, right? Not just in theology, right? What it means practically is that this verse doesn't promise that everything will feel good. It really promises that everything has a purpose, especially the things we think disqualify us, the things that we've done to disqualify us. Listen, um Romans 8:28. Yes. um, Listen, you have likely experienced moments that felt like the failure ruined everything, right? That this mistake proved that I wasn't enough, right? If it was a divorce, if it was a foreclosure, if it was bankruptcy, if it was a broken relationship, even if it was some issues with parenting, right? Maybe you didn't get the promotion. Maybe you dropped out of school, right? You end up failing, right? So again, you may have experienced moments like this, okay? Um, and the thoughts around that is like this failure ruined everything, right? And we will carry that story. But what this verse is really inviting us to see is that, what if that moment wasn't a detour? What if it wasn't a detour? What if it was a delivery of wisdom, of alignment, of deeper identity, right? What did I need? Right? What did I need to make that successful? What could have I done to make that successful? And I do an assessment, and then I start applying those things, and then I get back up and I try again, right? In this session, we are really reframe. My goal is to really reframe failure as feedback, okay? As failure as feedback. And what this verse becomes is an anchor of grace, right? It says that God can use even this even this failure. God can use it, right? The God in me can use it, right? And God created the creator of all things, right? Created this universal law. So it has to be useful. All right. It whispers, you're still in progress and nothing is wasted. Listen, you're still in progress and nothing is wasted. Listen, if God is working within me, if God is working within you, then nothing you've lived through is without meaning. if God is really working within you and you believe that, right? And there's a God in you working, like a divine thing, a divine space, right, in you that's working, then nothing that happens is without meaning. Even even your most lowest moments become tools to help you align, right? To help you with alignment if you choose to partner, if you choose to partner with the lesson. All right. Um, and so instead of thinking, God is up there fixing my mess, God is up there fixing my mess, I'm gonna pray about it and I'm gonna leave it up to God, right? I want you to embody that the God in me is redeeming the wisdom from my wounds, right? This law of polarity is I got hurt and I can redeem from that hurt and experience pleasure or purpose, right? That is the law. That's the redeeming thing. So the verse saying that, all things in all, and we know that in all things God worked for the good of those who love him. That is the polarity. So you're still in process and nothing is wasted. All right. And this sadness or this pain that you've experienced is redeeming the wisdom from that wound, right? That's the polarity of it. And we have to give ourselves a chance to really experience, right, the good, the wholeness of who we are, right? And that's where gratitude shifts everything. That's where your power is more. When I can start looking at that situation as, in some gratitude. Okay, I went through that. Okay, I know that that was teaching me something. What was that teaching me? Right. And I become receptive of it. Okay. All right. Um, our promise verse. So our promise verse is Proverbs 24 and 15. And I'm going to say this. When I started reading the Bible a long time ago, I would get so cringed by the language and the words that it used, right? And it would kind of be scary for me. So when I chose this verse, I'm gonna tell you that came up in I'm like, but I want to say it and I want to break it down. All right. So Proverbs 24, 15 and 16 says, do not lurk like the thief near the house of the righteous, right? Do not plunder their dwelling place, for through the for though the righteous fall 7 times, right, they rise again, but the wicked stumble with calamity when calamity strikes. I'm gonna read this again. All right. Do not lurk like a thief in the house of the righteous, and do not plunder their dwelling place. For though the righteous fall 7 times, right? They rise again, but the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. Listen, what does this mean? So let's start with this word wicked. Is that okay? So in modern language, wicked in this verse is seen as harsh, like evil, demonic, right? Morally corrupt. But in Hebrew context, you guys, guess what wicked means? This word is translated as Rasha, Rasha, actually meaning someone who lives without moral grounding and alignment. Listen, someone who trusts only themselves, or their own limited logic, right? Or someone who's disconnected from the divine truth, justice, or wisdom, or someone who does not get back up, someone who does not get back up and stay stuck in the fall. All right. So when we hear this word wicked, we think evil, demonic, morally corrupt, but that's not the Hebrew translation of it. What it means is that you have detached yourself, right? You're limited by your own logic, by your own understanding, right? You don't have a moral grounding or any type of alignment, right? You're disconnected from the divinity that is within you, right? This truth, this justice, and this wisdom. And when you fall, you don't get back up. You stay stuck in that space, right? So it's not about being bad versus good. It's really about your posture, your heart posture, right? And in contrast, the righteous isn't the one who never fails. All right. The righteous isn't the one who never fails. Okay. But it's the one who returns back to the truth after they fall. All right. So the wicked is not someone that God hates. Okay. The wicked is not someone that God hates. It's someone that refuses the invitation to grow, to learn, and to align. All right. So this verse, so in the verse, the wicked stumbles with calamity. When calamity strikes, guess what? They stay down. The wicked stay down because they don't have the anchor out. They don't have an anchor outside of their circumstance. All right. So their confidence isn't rooted in truth. It's rooted in appearance and ego and fear and shame. Okay. All right. Does that make sense? All right. So this is not a verse to shame people who are struggling. It's not about that. It's a reminder that your fall doesn't define you. It actually that your fall doesn't return you. Your fall doesn't define you. Your return does. It's how you get back up. It's when you get back up. That is your defining person. All right. That is the defining, right? Your righteousness is not about being perfect, you guys. They say the righteous fall 7 times, right? But they get back up. All right. Listen, you're righteous not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to rise with wisdom, because you're willing to learn from it, because you understand that this is a part of life. So you're willing to accept the polarity. Okay. So the wicked don't get back up because their foundation was never really stable, right? The righteous rise again because they're rooted in something bigger than their failure. And so I want to ask you, is your situation, the circumstances, the pain, is that bigger than the divinity in you, right? Have you identified with that so much that you're not willing to get back up? Because wicked is not evil. It's not, in this case, it's not saying it's evil. It's just saying that you're not even living in your divinity. Divinity said that you have the ability to transcend what? Any limitation. All right. And that you're going to fall. You're going to fall, but will you get back up? Okay. Like there's a righteous resilience in you. Okay. There's a righteous resilience in you. Even when you fall, that divinity, that God in you has given you the grace to rise again with clarity, not condemnation, not judgment, not anything, right? With clarity, with a lesson, okay, with understanding, with some type of learning with that. All right. So here's another thing. Do not lurk like the thief near the house of the righteous, and do not plunder their dwelling place. All right. Do not lurk like the thief near the house of righteousness, and do not plunder their dwelling place. What does it literally mean? Right? What does it at face value, right? This is a warning to wrongdoers, right? Right. And we hear people say this, right? This is a warning. Do not mess with the righteous, right? Do not steal from them, right? Do not think that do not think their falls mean that they're vulnerable, right? So we interpret this verse like, do not mess with God's children, right? The righteous ones, right? So in biblical terms, the house of righteousness really symbolized more than just a literal house. It really represents someone's life, their legacy, their values, and their stability. So the writer is saying, you may see someone down, right? Don't assume that they're out though, right? Don't assume that they're out. Don't try to take what God has anchored, this law of polarity. Don't try to take that from them, right? They're down right now, which means what? That they had an opportunity to get back up again, right? So don't judge them. Don't do that. But even more deeper, right? Even more deeper, this can be interpreted as do not prey on the righteous while they're building, right? So do not prey on people while they're rebuilding their house, while they're rebuilding their life, right? Don't take advantage of someone just because they're in a season of hardship, right? So this is very external, but I'm going to turn this internal, right? Even more powerfully, right? We can apply this to our internal dialogue, right? To our personal growth. Listen, do not let fear, do not let shame, and do not let doubt rob you while you're healing. All right. Do not let fear, do not let shame, and do not let doubt rob you while you're healing, you guys. Right? That is the thief. Right? Don't mess with the righteous. Do not steal from them, and don't think that their flaws mean that they're vulnerable forever. What? Don't let the inner critic, this voice in your head, make you feel like you can't get back up again. Right? Don't allow these old circumstances and these old conditions, right, to do that. Right? To do that. Because when you allow that, that's the wickedness within, right? That's the misalignment. That's the logic talking to you. That's the you're disconnected from your divine truth, right? And that's the part of you that feels like you can't get back up. It keeps you stuck, right? So do not allow, right? Do not allow fear, shame, and doubt to really rob you while you're healing. All right. Right. So in the context of gratitude, right, in gratitude shift today, right, this thief could be the past version of you, right? This thief could be the past version of you that's trying to creep back up, right? The plunder could be the self-sabotaging, the old behaviors, or the doubt taking over when you're trying to rise again, you guys. And this is why we have the law of polarity, because if I know that everything has an opposite, right? Everything has an opposite, then that's my opportunity. That's where I can turn this obstacle into an opportunity, right? That is it. All right. So the tie-in is so verse 16 is the clapback. So verse 16 is for though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. So together, these two verses really are about protection and promise, right? The protection is don't come for the righteous while they're down, right? So don't allow this inner critic, right? I know we've seen it as external before and probably understood it as external, but it's really like don't allow this old, that hurt, that pain, that shame, that fear. Don't allow it, right, to steal your righteousness, to steal your divinity from you. Okay. And the promise is because you will rise again. You will rise again. And the comeback, guess what? It's ordained. It must happen. It's the polarity of life. All right. So even when you fall, right, the presence of God is there to protect what is yours. Okay. This law of polarity is there to protect what is yours. The pain, that means pleasure is yours. Okay. Living in no purpose or feeling like you don't, then that means purpose is yours. All right. The hurt, that means, you know, that fulfillment or lack of fulfillment, that means fulfillment is yours. All right. And in this hurt or this pain or this broken heart, it means that love is yours and it's present and these things are present. So who do you need to become? My question is, who do you need to become to live in the polarity of your life? All right. Listen, these verses destroy the lie that failure equals unworthiness, you guys. It redefines what righteousness look like. It's like more resilience and not about being perfect. So many people, they hold a silent shame, or we hold a silent shame, right, for failing back for falling back into our old patterns and our old behaviors, for setting goals and not following through with them, right? For believing something will work and watching it collapse. All right. So many of us hold this silent shame about these situations that we have experienced. But Proverbs 24:16 says, you are not righteous because you didn't fail. You're righteous because you keep rising. No matter how many times you fall, you get back up. No matter how many people hurt your feelings, you still go out and you connect to people. No matter how many times your heart was hurt, you still love, right? Because you know that love is still exists. So for all of us who feel like our heart is hardened and that love just doesn't exist, that's just not even true. If your heart was broken and you experience pain, then pleasure exists. If your heart was broken and you feel like love doesn't live here anymore, that's a lie. It has to. It's the law, right? Right. So in this session, these verses really give you spiritual permission, divine permission, right, to release the guilt and to really step into your grace. All right. So the God within you is rising even when you fall, right? It's not this, you're not disqualified by what didn't work, right? You're empowered. You're empowered by the strength to get back up with wisdom, right? To get back up with wisdom, right? This really reframes failure as a part of the rhythm and not a form of rejection. All right. And not a form of rejection. All right. These verses, they validate the lived experience of falling short, right? Of being hurt and feeling off course, right? They anchor this law of polarity in divine truth. The opposite is a part of the process, you guys. And they remind you that God isn't grading you, He's growing you. God ain't grading you, He's growing you. All right. So what if the most sacred thing about your life isn't how perfect you look, right? Isn't about how perfect you look when you rise. It's about how honest you are when you fall. It's about how honest you are when you fall and you get back up with God still in you, with this divinity still in you. Listen, this verse isn't just warning. It's a warning for outside threats. It's a spiritual reminder that you're not vulnerable just because you're healing. You're powerful. You're still protected, and your dwelling place, which is your life, your purpose, and your future. Guess what? It's still yours. It's still yours. Now, are you going to be the person that takes hold of it? Right? Are you going to be a person that takes hold of it? All right. All right. So, what if the fall was never, um, what if the fall was never the point of keeping you stuck? What if the rise was the revelation? What if the rising is where you get everything that you need to experience the life that you wanted? Are you willing to rise? Are you willing to rise to that occasion? All right, if that makes sense, put a 4 in the chat for me. That was my biblical wisdom. Kind of went long, but I definitely wanted to share that with you guys because I think it's so important that we understand that one, this law of polarity, we have all experienced bad things, but do we still have the courage to you know to go out and know that there's a polarity in life, and even how we handle people. One of my things is that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's the law of polarity. What are you paying attention to? Right? Are you focused on the conflict, or are you focused on the aligned part? Because everything you do in this life is going to have its match and it's going to have its conflict. And so many of us are caught up in the conflicts of life, the resistance of life, only to prove that the story, that the belief that we have that life ain't good and people ain't good and love is not good. And we keep cycling that back over and over and over again. And I just want to remind you that life is the most best thing and the most honorable thing that we could do in our life is really stand for ourselves, forgive people, and really start to take hold of our life and align and advance ourselves by giving ourselves grace and offering that grace to other people, and offering that grace to other people and really turning our obstacles into opportunities. And how do we do that? Through this thing called gratitude and looking at the situations that we're holding captive, this hurt that we're holding captive, and knowing that there's a polar opposite of that. And will you do the thing that's required, to experience that? All right. Lucretia said, Amen. Toya said, I needed this. Thank you. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Okay. So let's go into our action. So how do we put this into practice, you guys? How do we put this into practice? Well, we put this into practice by first writing down one of our past failures that you have been avoiding. Okay. Write down one of the past failures that you have been avoiding. And then I want you to list 3 things that it taught you. Okay. List 3 things that it taught you. And then I want you to identify one new goal that you've been afraid to name because of it. One new goal that you've been afraid to name because of the failure. And I want you to write that down. All right. All right. Our journal prompt, your journal prompt for today is what old story, listen, what old story do you need to release? What old story do you need to rewrite so that you can build, right, a vision, so that you can build from vision instead of fear? Okay. What old story do you need to rewrite so that you can build from vision instead of fear? All right. And then our affirmation for today, I am no longer building from fear of failure. I'm building from faith in my future. I'm no longer building from this fear of failure. I'm building from faith in my future, you guys. Okay. And then today, this is our intention. I give my past permission to empower me, but I don't give it permission to limit me. All right. All right. I give my past permission to empower me, not to limit me. All right. So that is our daily intention. And then for the next 24 hours, you guys, I want you to our challenge is I want you to share, okay? I want you to share one past failure and one lesson you've gained. One past failure and one lesson that you gained from it. All right, with someone you trust. Speak it out loud and release the shame. Release the shame, you guys. And I'll always do the call, the challenge, and the charge. And today's call, challenge, and charge for you is to okay. Today's call, challenge, and charge is what old failures are you ready to see differently? Okay. What new dream are you really ready to pursue now that the shame isn't steering you? And then the charge is to go shape your life, with power, with peace, with power, and with perspective. Listen, if this session resonated with you, if it resonated with you, and you're walking away with some insight today, you already know what to do. Drop a fire in that chat for me. Let's celebrate our growth together. And this is not a growth alone, right? So we want to make sure that you go subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get any notifications about anything that I have going on. And I'm trying to grow that YouTube channel to 1,000 subscribers or more by 2016. And if this resonated with you, right, and you feel like it's the breakthrough that you needed, maybe it'll be a breakthrough for a friend. So invite your friends and your family and anybody that you feel like that could benefit from these life lessons. Each one reach one. All right. I'm trying to build this community again to over 1,000 members by 2026, right? 1,000 members or more. And I do want you to know that if this session really woke up something in you, that's exactly the type of insight that it was created to do. And even more, it's the kind of insight we explore in our weekly coaching labs, right? That space is where we don't just reflect, you guys, we reshape. Okay. Okay. We reshape. So I do want to remind you that if you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to explore, if you're ready to understand the polarity, and if you need support, right? If you need support, um, growth isn't about pretending it didn't hurt you guys. It's about really trusting, right, that it meant something, right? So let your failure feed your future, right? And if you need help with doing that, if you need help with letting your failure feed your future, you guys, join Project Life, right? Join Project Life. Get in a community of people to really help you change your language, because accountability is important. I talked about the redwood trees earlier, and people who know me know that the redwood trees is one of my symbols in my business. Why? Because they don't go deep, but they connect to one another. And the redwood trees are the tallest trees in the world, right? And their strength is in community, right? So they interlock with each other on the ground, which allows them to grow taller, which allows them to have support. Okay. And so I love the metaphor of the redwood tree. And those are the type of communities that I like to build, because a big part of it is that we don't have to go so deep if we can support one another, right? we can still grow tall. And that's why I moved from really being a therapist to being this life coach, because I wanted to create communities where we connect to one another, and in this connection we're able to grow tall. And we don't have to go all the way down deep and deep like therapy sometimes would do. We can just get a plan for who you need to become, and when those things come up, we can talk about them, we can rewrite them, we can shape them. You can feel supported in that from me as a coach, but I don't need to diagnose you with anything. I don't need to limit your capacity with language and labels. What I can do is empower you, though, and partner with you and become a thought partner with you in your growth and evolution. And I offer, programs and services to individuals who really are looking for a thought partner to help them really expand how they see themselves, because the same mind that created the problem may not be the mind that can solve it. So we know that this is the last month. Project Life is $47 to the end of this month. So join at SheilaLittle.com/life. All right. And remember, if you can shape it in your mind, you guys, you can have it in your life. I love you. I love you. I love you. And I will see you tomorrow when we talk about uh, a different law, right? I'll see you tomorrow. Let me see what we're talking about tomorrow, you guys. I usually will put it, but tomorrow we're talking about the universal law of, where are you? Tomorrow we're talking about another universal law, but we're talking about patterns. We're talking about patterns tomorrow. It's going to be Thursday, Energy Audit Thursday. We're talking about, where are my laws at? And we're talking about the law of opposition, the law of opposition, right? Opposition, the law of cause and effect, right? The law of cause and effect, you guys. Your habits shape your results, right? Your habits shape your results. So I look to see you for tomorrow's session. I love you. I love you. I love you. Till later. Till later. Bye.